it's Stasi, and today I am going to be talking about the books that I read in April. We are actually filming this on May 1st. Look at us go. We're actually also in our pajamas today because when you're spending every day not being able to leave your house, that's kind of where we end up. And it's also really cold and grey and rainy today, which also means we're back to our lamp lighting. But the other thing is also that the only place in this house that I've found really has decent natural lighting when it's not dark and grey is that back room with the like the plain white walls and everything, which as much as I like good lighting, it's a bit boring to just be in there all the time. So we're doing this with dodgy lighting, in pajamas, we've got our tea, we're just gonna sit back and relax and talk about the books I read. I think there were 5 or 6 of them. We'll see how we go. I clearly planned my videos out so well beforehand. I'm that person who sits in front of a camera and just rambles and hopes for the best. April. So April was a month that, well, I spent the entire month in my house other than going to the supermarket a few times, really. Difficult and weird time for us all, I think, and something I have been doing is I've been doing a fair amount of art, but that's unrelated and that's not why you're here. So, I had forgotten that the very first thing I read is actually the most hyped book, the most hyped book that I read this month. It's, of course, Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. Okay. Straight off the bat, I have mixed feelings about this. So obviously this is Maas's new adult fantasy series, and it's actually called, what is it, House of Earth and Blood, but nobody's calling it that, I guess, because we're all lazy. It's the Crescent City series, and also that's the big words in the book. But we've got this adult fantasy series, which is really like urban fantasy vibes, where you are following this main character, Bryce, who is half fae, half human, and there's some shiz going down, and she has to try and uncover some things that have happened, basically. I think if you say more than that, you kind of give a huge spoiler for the book, and yet that huge spoiler is on the back. So this is a bit of a trouble with synopses of books sometimes, is that I knew a major thing that was happening earlier in the book immediately because of the synopsis, and so it was a strange experience to know that and continue reading. But anyway, that aside, overall I did mostly enjoy this book, but that doesn't mean I didn't have any problems with it. So what can I say? I really enjoyed Danica as a character, but obviously anyone who's read it knows what happens there. And Bryce, I had mixed feelings about. And the other main character in this book, of course, is Hunt, who is our male character. And look, the most used word in this book, I think, was alcohol. So Sarah J. Maas is clearly trying to kind of poke fun of that stereotypical male character that's in a lot of books, and that she in particular is known for writing a lot of. But I don't think you can make fun of something like that while simultaneously doing nothing but that, you know? Like Hunt, the moment quite early on where I was immediately like, okay, it doesn't matter what else he does now, I don't know whether we can ever come back from this, was when he condescendingly said sweetheart to Bryce, and that's just like one of those things that sets me off and that I really hate, those kind of condescending pet names that men sometimes use to try and like put women in their place. So that immediately had me like, ugh. And there was also just, I don't know, it was a fun read, but there's just these little things that are niggling in my head. So I ended up giving it a 3. I kind of don't know entirely where I stand. I'm probably going to pick up the next book, let's be honest, because The only Sarah J Maas book at this point that I've never read is the Catwoman one. I did DNF Tower of Dawn, but outside of that, I have read everything else. And so I have this mixed history with her where some of her books I find really easy and enjoyable, some of her books I have big problems with, or then there's like A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I hated that first book, but then I enjoyed the second one. So we have a weird history. Hello, I completely forgot to mention that you cannot tell me that Danica and Bryce had a completely platonic relationship with the amount that was spoken about how much they loved each other and the angsty kind of build up to one of them saying I love you to the other. Like, you can not tell me that was completely platonic, especially if you're gonna come around and look at her other novels, such as Aelin and Rowan, and tell me that they couldn't have been just friends. So, the other thing, I know this is a really small thing, but somebody pointed it out when I first started reading it, and so now I can't not think about it, is the fact that the werewolves in this, their clothes, like, transform with them? Like, the clothes just meld into their body when they transform? Is that how it works? I don't know. I think I'm the type of person who thinks too much into things. I think is part of the problem. So when there's something like this that has lots of like little things niggling at it, it can be hard for me to fully just go, yes, this is enjoyable. And then again, Hunt bothered me, which isn't a me overanalyzing thing. That's just that whole character archetype I'm so sick of seeing and gets so on my nerves. Again, that alcohol stereotype that she's still going with. I think that's probably enough to say about that book for the moment. I don't know how I feel. And it seems to be a really polarizing book where people either really love it or really dislike it. And I'm kind of in the middle where I'm like, yeah, it was easy and kind of fun and stuff. But then I see every one of your criticisms and I pretty much agree with all of them. So, next thing I listened to was actually Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. Maggie Stiefvater, how do you actually say her name? I don't know. Which is the first book in her new series, which kind of continues on from, it's connected to her Raven Boys series basically. And you're following the, what are their names? The Lynches in this, so Ronan, etc. I don't know how much you can say about this series without kind of spoiling some things for the Raven Boys, but essentially it follows that set of brothers and weird magical kind of stuff happens. And I think I did it myself a bit of a disservice with this book possibly by listening to the audiobook. Like, I read the Raven Boys years ago now, and I kind of don't remember very much about them. So I think I enjoyed them, but I haven't held like a love of them or anything. So I don't know, listening to this book, whether, like, I didn't even rate this book because I don't know whether it's the audiobook that kind of ruined it for me, or whether this type of story in general I can't connect to that well, because like magical realism has never been something I'm necessarily huge on. So the other thing is that I think I genuinely like fell asleep a few times listening to this because you know, I'm in my house not doing much, so I've just been kind of snoozing off sometimes. And the thing is, like, I remember some things and I remember kind of going, oh, that's interesting. And like, this author, like, she has lots of interesting ideas and like the things that were going on in here. But by the end of the book, like right near the end of the book, suddenly there were all these people and there was all this kind of dramatic stuff happening. And I was like, wait, how did we get here? Who are these people? I should probably know this, but I just, like, it hasn't, like, I didn't retain any of that. So I think it might have been the audiobook, because I struggle with audiobooks in general sometimes. But so I kind of feel like maybe I should go back at some point and try and read it physically, or maybe this book just isn't for me. I'm not really sure. I know a lot of people who've read this have really loved it, so again, I don't know whether it's just not for me or whether it's that audiobooks make me struggle to enjoy narratives sometimes. Tea break. Then I read Red Sister by Mark Lawrence, which is an adult fantasy. I think we should all realize by now that that's the main genre I seem to read from, but regardless. In this, we are following, I'm forgetting her name again. I just read this book. I forgot her name. Nona? Nona. Why do I keep forgetting her name? Maybe that's kind of a reflection of how I feel about this. Again, I don't think I gave a rating to this because it was another one was like, I don't know. It wasn't bad, but I just didn't connect to it, and I'm not really interested in continuing with it. Sometimes I don't really know what it is with books. Like, there's nothing in particular in this book that I can say, yeah, that was bad, I didn't like that, that's why I don't want to continue. Like, none of that. It's just that I got to the end of this and I was like, well, that's a thing I read. Can anyone relate to that? But, you know, this is, in theory, this should have been something I loved, because it's a bunch of female characters, and it starts from when they're children, and they're in this kind of church under a bunch of assassin nuns, and they're training to be stronger and all of those kind of things. So it had a lot of elements I should have liked, but I got to the end and I was like, I can't. It's really frustrating. Like, I would rather dislike a book than have this feeling, I think, because at least then I would know why. I find it really frustrating. Like, it happened a little bit with that, with the other book that I just talked about, Cool Down the Hawk. I had a bit of a similar thing there, where it was like, I didn't hate it, I didn't dislike it, I wasn't completely bored by it, but I got to the end and just didn't feel anything or really care, and I don't know why. See, at least with that maths one, I really enjoyed some things, I really disliked some things, and I can actually put my finger on that of what it was. But these two, I don't know, and it's frustrating. It's just frustrating. But then, like, obviously Nevernight, which I have up here, which again is a young, ruthless female assassin, loved it. So, but then I think maybe part of the thing is that Nevernight had that kind of humor all throughout it that I really connected with, which maybe in particular is a bit of an Australian humor, that kind of sarcastic humor that J. Christoph kind of inserts into things, which is a lot of communication that happens here. Off topic slightly, moving on with the books I read. Just quickly, I'm just going to acknowledge that it is something I listen to, but I don't have much to say about it beyond that, and it's The Happy Closet by Anne Marie O'Connor. It's one of those non-fiction books about organizing your wardrobe and what you should be wearing and stuff, and it wasn't really the type of book that I was completely expecting, or the kind of other similar books I've read before, and I really think that we need to stop enforcing fashion rules on people. But outside of that, it's a thing that I listened to this month. Next thing I read on ebook was something that I actually really enjoyed, and because I don't have to hold it up, I can have my tea again. And that was The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starlin. I'm so bad at remembering names of things. Yes, this is a horror novel, and I think if I had actually known the full synopsis before I read it, I might have been more hesitant to pick it up, but I did really love it. So I'm hesitant to say much about it, but all I knew before going into it was I'd seen people mention it as a sapphic horror that they really enjoyed, and that's all I really knew. If you want to read this horror book and want to go into it fairly blind like I did, skip ahead in this video a little bit because I'll just talk briefly about it. But basically, this is a novel where we're in this kind of, I guess we're in a kind of sci-fi, possibly dystopian type situation. It's definitely a sci-fi horror though, where people are on these different planets, and on this planet there is this thing that goes on where cave diving is the thing that happens, where people go down and dive down into these caves for, you know, weeks at a time at minimum, looking for kind of ore and things like that, that the corporations that are paying them can then obviously benefit from monetarily and all that kind of stuff. And in this book, we are following see again, I don't remember their names, and I finished this like 2 days ago, and I really liked it. So it's not me not remembering names. It's not a comment. It's not a comment on what I thought of the book. I'm just terrible at remembering names. But this woman has been sent on this cave diving expedition, and when she goes down into the caves, things get a little weird. And also, it was, again, I didn't know anything about this going in, but it was also an interesting thing to read right now, considering there are themes of isolation within it, because she's down there in those caves alone, right? And that's why, one of the reasons that if someone had told me about this directly, I don't know whether I would have been interested in picking it up, because one woman down in caves alone doing sciencey expedition stuff doesn't necessarily sound like something I'm immediately interested in. I mean, I'm a big fantasy reader for one. I don't tend to gravitate towards sci-fi, but I'm also a very character-driven reader, and again, you have fairly limited characters in this, but I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars because, I don't know, it was the romance, if you call it that in some respects felt a little bit weird to me. Really enjoyed this, and it had some really spooky vibes going on, and I'm a big fan of horror, and if anyone has any recommendations of anything kind of similar to this, just in, not in like direct content, but just in kind of, I guess, female-driven horrors, I am interested, because this was actually my favorite thing that I read this month. So, more spooky horror books, please. Thank you. Last thing I read was actually a kids book that I picked up on NetGalley because it was in the Read Now section and it looked interesting to me. It is, where's the full title? It's the International Day of the Girl, Celebrating Girls Around, I'm assuming that's around the world, by Jessica D. Humphreys. Now what this is one of those kids books that basically has a page dedicated to a different kind of character or story. There's been a bunch of them going around in recent years, and this book is also beautifully illustrated. The illustrations in this I loved. Technically, I think I gave this a higher rating than The Luminous Dead, but The Luminous Dead is going to stick with me longer. But this, it's one of those stories, one of those books that's beautifully illustrated throughout and has a page dedicated to different stories. And obviously it's a children's book, so they're very short stories. So if that's my only complaint, is that there wasn't very much detail on each page about, like, it was very simplistic, but again, it's you know, appealing to a young audience. It's something you could take into a primary school classroom. And you know, their stories about, it's all to do with the International Day of the Girl, and it talks a little bit about why that exists and how that came to be, and then it shows a bunch of stories of different girls throughout the world and kind of things that they've had to face, and then it also gives like a little bit of information in like an info box related to what was briefly mentioned in that little page story. And I thought this was really good, and I think would be a really valuable resource. And again, the illustrations just really draw me in. Like, I'm someone who loves picture books. Like, I use the excuse I'm a teacher sometimes to buy picture books, but really I just love them. I mean, I love books and I love art, and they're usually like the perfect mix of them. So it's beautiful and valuable, and I learnt some things along the way that I didn't necessarily know, and it's also a beautifully diverse book. Like, you've got obviously people from all across the world, different races, different situations. There's also, I think there was also a girl in a wheelchair. Like, it is a very diverse book, and I think it is something that would be really good to be putting in children's libraries, essentially. But that is everything I read. So 2 books I felt pretty meh about, 2 books I really loved, and then there's Crescent City. I don't know The other thing I've actually been considering is talking about movies I've watched as well, because I don't watch necessarily a lot of movies. I mean, recently we've been watching The Vampire Diaries, which we're up to a point now that my partner's never seen before, but it's at least my third full rewatch of the series, because The Vampire Diaries is a bit of a comfort TV series for me. I posted this on Twitter and had a bit of a chat about it with people about what your comfort series are, because it's, you know, it's obviously a very strange time in the world right now, so we're all kind of grasping for those things that make us feel comfortable, that make us feel at home and feel a bit better, and The Vampire Diaries is one of those TV shows for me, so that's why we've been watching it. But I do occasionally watch movies. I do occasionally watch movies that I really love. Like, definitely have a new favourite from this year, which was the last thing I saw in cinemas, so at least it was before they closed. But anyway, getting off topic again. Thinking about talking about movies as well, considering that is something I've done a little bit on this channel anyway, even though I think there's less of an interest for it, but I don't know. I'm rambling again, I'm sorry, but also quick note, I don't know how obvious my makeup's actually going to be by the time this is edited and uploaded, but I do have like bright pink and blue, and there's a little bit of purple. You can't really see, but my hair's obviously purple. And as much as you might think that this look is inspired by Harley Quinn, it's not. It's actually because of the whole bi flag situation. If anyone saw any of that going around Twitter yesterday, I don't know if I want to say much about it, but basically that was my inspiration for my makeup today. We got the bi flag colours. I'm rambling. I've been alone in my house for too many days in a row because my partner's still working and just comes home at night. And anyway, have you read any of these books? What did you think about them? What books have you read recently that you really enjoyed? And how are you keeping busy in this strange time that we are currently in? Let's have a chat. Let's communicate, because we need to find ways to still be communicating when we're not allowed to actually physically see each other. I need to stop rambling. I need to finish my tea before it gets cold. So I think that's it. Stasi out.